Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls, and I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes designed to inspire your spirit. And you can learn more at my website, illuminatingsouls.com. But for now, the angels and I are here to help you fall asleep. And I want to say thank you so much for listening. It is truly a blessing to share this sanctuary with you. I think that space right before we go to sleep is a sweet and loving time. And it is also a wonderful opportunity to connect with the angels. And before we begin, I do have a small request to make. If you are enjoying this podcast, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to know how it's working for you. I'd love your input about which episodes are your favorite. And I would also so appreciate it if you would consider leaving a review on iTunes. It does make a difference, and for those of you who have already left reviews, thank you so much. Your messages touch my heart, and thank you. So back to the wonderful world of sleep podcasts. They are one of my tried and true methods of self-care. As most of you know, I listen to a sleep podcast almost every night. Sometimes I listen to this one, so I do listen to my own podcast as a sleep tool, and it works for me. I will also say that right now I am listening to the Sleepy Bookshelf, and they're reading Little Women, which I love that book. And it's so funny, I can't get through an episode, so I know what happens in the story, but I haven't been able to listen consciously to the episodes that I'm on all the way through yet. So I play them over 2 or 3 nights. And that's a good thing that I can't remember them. That means it's doing its job. And it might sound a little bit odd to be creating an hour-long broadcast that my hope is you won't be awake to hear. You know, so often when people create podcasts, they really hope you listen and pay attention. And for me, my hope is you can't quite remember what we've been talking about by the time you get to the morning. Now, that said, I do know that some of you listen during the daytime, and you do enjoy listening awake to the episodes. And if that is what brings you joy, it is my blessing to share your waking time with you as well. So however you are guided to use this broadcast, you have my love and my gratitude for this opportunity to spend time with you. As I record this episode, I will say I am feeling this big, bright energy. It's the middle of the day, And usually I record these episodes early in the morning before most of the world wakes up because I love the quiet softness of the energy then. But the last few mornings have been busy, and so I decided to just make time right now. I just came back from a trip into the outside world. I drove up to Napa. For those of you who might be curious about where I live in the San Francisco Bay Area in a town called Vallejo, which is about 20 miles north of Berkeley and 20 miles south of Napa. And our Trader Joe's and Whole Foods are together up in Napa. And so usually once a week, I drive up there, and it's a lovely drive. And I don't know, it makes me happy. It's weird. I love grocery shopping because I love food, right? I don't know how many of you enjoy going to your local stores, but I enjoy my outings when I have to go shopping, and I have a whole routine, a rhythm to what I do. And I just got back, and I'm underneath the blanket fort. So for those of you who are new to the podcast, I have this big, cozy blanket that I throw over my monitor to help dampen the sound. And it also brings me into this beautiful cocoon of love where I get to share it with you. So I want to invite you to get comfortable in your body. Snuggle on in and cozy on up in whatever way makes you happy. And let's take a few nice deep breaths in and out as we gently call ourselves forward into the heart of God. And as we do, I'm going to navigate back to this big, beautiful energy I have been feeling today, and especially right now. This energy feels like a sweet invitation. It feels filled with potential. And the best reflection I can bring to you is it feels like it is an invitation to blossom open. And in this concept, there's nothing you have to do. The blossoming is already happening. You know, a flower doesn't have to imagine and get ready to blossom. It is in its nature to use its life force to blossom open. And I believe the same is true for us. So this energy that I'm feeling feels like the invitation to blossom. And in this moment, you need not know what you are blossoming open to. Perhaps you do know, but if you don't, it's okay, because your soul, your greater spirit, God, and the angels know. So I affirm that while we are together here in this beautiful sanctuary of light, that you are blossoming open to dreams of your heart, dreams you may not even know that you are carrying. I think some of the best dreams come as a surprise sometimes. Some of the best dreams are dreams God asks of us. They show up in our consciousness one day, and they might feel a little audacious, a little left of center. Like me? Wait, you mean me? The angels say, yes, we mean you. You know, we are ever evolving beings. We are always shifting. We are growing. And as we heal, and as we evolve, new invitations are sent our way. So I affirm that beautiful soul whispers are flowing to you now. Even if you're not aware of them, it's okay. Sometimes soul whispers are subtle, and we don't know them right away, but they show up as wandering, rambling thoughts. And for me, they often come in the shower or when I'm first waking up. And my consciousness is just rambling all over the place. And all of a sudden something drops in like, hey, you know what you should do? Usually says, you know what I should do? I should reach out to. And then a friend's name drops in. And I'll think, I haven't talked to them in a long time. That's often how a soul whisper shows up for me. And I have some lovely soul whispers that are percolating. I'm not ready to share them yet, but I definitely feel the energy of the blossoming happening. I am ready to embrace an even brighter expression of my life force. And if that resonates for you, I invite you to do the same. It doesn't mean you have to do anything differently in this moment. It's more like an invitation we say yes to. Like, okay, yes, I'm ready to ignite my spark. I am ready to feel into the vibrancy of all that I am. And just take a nice deep breath in, coming into sweet reunion with the beauty of your true spirit. That you are as beautiful as a sunrise. You are as magical as a rainbow. And there are opportunities that are blossoming open within you and for you that will bring you so much joy. And the angels are here to help you connect. So while you get comfortable and cozy, I'm going to invite the angels in to join us, even though they are already here. So beautiful angels on high, I invite you to join us here. And I ask that you imbue this broadcast with waves of love in service to each of our beloveds that are hearing this broadcast. And angels, I ask that you clear any old, outmoded, limiting beliefs that no longer serve. I ask that you bring to us miracles and blessings and joy and goodness. And dear ones, just take a deep breath in and visualize, imagine, allow it to be so. That the angels are filling the space you are in with a beautiful, soft, pink light that is filled with love for you. This light is healing. It is inspiring. It is here to help you remember who you are as a beloved of this universe. You are a divine being in human form. You are expansive. You are wise. You are creative. You are a gift in this world. And I am so grateful that you are here. So just take a breath in, allowing waves of relaxation to move through your body. You have done enough for this day, and now the angels are here to help you come into a beautiful space of rest. This episode is going to last about an hour, so you have plenty of time. And if you need even more ramblings and company, you can always queue up more episodes, and the angels and I will be with you for as long as you want. Truly, I am grateful for this opportunity to shine love upon you. It is my deepest blessing to do so. And so I do so right now. Oh, angels, I ask that you amplify this frequency of love, that each of the beloveds listening will feel the profound gratitude that I have for them. Just breathe, my friends, and I will breathe with you. There is such a deep sense of joy in me in this moment that we get to come together. We get to share in bedtime stories. We get to be in our cozies all together. And so you rest. And I'm going to tell you a story. And while you rest, the angels will be taking good care of you. So now, on to our story. So for this episode, we're going to ramble and wander a bit. I will be honest, often I come to these episodes knowing what we're going to talk about, or knowing what story I'm going to share with you, whether I'm going to read to you something from the public domain or tell you a story from my own life. And I'm not quite sure where this is going to go. So we're going to go on an adventure together as I weave together a tapestry of a story for you. This episode is going to be released on the Jewish holiday of Erev Rosh Hashanah. I will start off by saying that I grew up in Skokie, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. And as I was growing up, Skokie was very Jewish. I think perhaps there were only a handful of kids in my first grade class who were not Jewish. So I grew up surrounded by Jewish community. And when I went to college, it was the first time I'd ever met anyone who had never met a Jewish person before. And so some of you listening may have never met anyone who's Jewish, or you know very little about the holidays. You hear about them, but maybe you don't know what they are. And I will say this is not going to be about religion. I am not at all equipped to teach that or speak eloquently about it. My perspective more comes from my cultural experiences. So Rosh Hashanah is part of the High Holy Days, and it's it starts off with Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. And then about 10 days later is Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. My memories of Rosh Hashanah are good. The high holy days are important in Judaism, and we would always go to temple, and we would go to the children's services when we were younger, which are much shorter and easier for children to sit through. And because I am a foodie, almost every memory that I have of my life is somehow tied back to food. I will say that Rosh Hashanah, we would get apples and honey for a sweet new year. So I often associate Rosh Hashanah with honey and apples. Erev Rosh Hashanah is the night before Rosh Hashanah begins. Erev means eve, so Erev Rosh Hashanah. And typically in our home, we always had a special meal for Erev Rosh Hashanah before we went to temple. And usually our meal would involve kugel. If you're a loyal listener, you will know of my love of all things kugel, which is a Jewish casserole, and ours was always a sweet noodle kugel. And there usually would be brisket, which was usually made with some Lipton onion soup mix. And there would be tzimmus, which is a sweet dish usually made with carrots and sweet potatoes and prunes and apricots, so dried fruit and sweet root vegetables. We would have a challah, which is a delicious Jewish bread, which is very sweet and eggy. I guess it might be a Jewish form of brioche, if you know what brioche is. It's much denser than brioche, but challah is delicious. And then my mom would make a honey cake. I was hoping I would have my mom's recipe for honey cake to share with you, but I forgot to ask my sister for it, and I don't have it. And I looked through all of my Jewish cookbooks looking for one to share, so I have one and I will share it with you. And I have a lot of warm memories about Rosh Hashanah. I sang in the choir as a kid. I was in the children's choir. And so it was a time that we got to see our friends. And Rosh Hashanah is a happy holiday. It's a bright, happy time. And also, when it fell on a weekday, we got to be out of school, which was super cool. I hated school, so any excuse not to be there was awesome for me. And so as I was contemplating what to share with you in this episode for story time, I thought, I don't think I have enough Rosh Hashanah stories other than to just share that I love the holiday. But I thought we could go through one of my old Jewish cookbooks. I have a really good one to share with you. So, as some of you know, I have started collecting old community cookbooks that the Jewish sisterhoods would put out. So if you think of the world before the internet, the way you would get recipes was you might find something in the newspaper and you'd cut it out and put it in your scrapbook or a recipe box that somehow all households had. You might get it out of a cookbook. Someone would write it down for you. And back then, we weren't so concerned with, is this a recipe that has been perfected? This was really a time of life when recipes were passed down. You know, a little pinch of that, a little pat of margarine, back when margarine was a thing. I love looking through these old cookbooks. They feel like well-worn companions to a time of life that has moved on. And this cookbook I'm going to share with you, I just got about a week ago. I didn't know what was in it, but there are some treasures in it, including a lot of things that are labeled as dietetic. I'm laughing because if any of you grew up in a similar generation to me, you will know dietetic was a big thing back then. Dietetic pop, as we would call it in the Midwest. Other parts of the U.S. would call it soda. Saccharin, sweet and low. All of these things were considered to be important because we were all perpetually on diets. So this book we're going to be reading from is called The Feast Upon Cookbook, and it's from Temple Judea Sisterhood. And Temple Judea is in Manhasset, New York. I'm not sure where Manhasset is. And I don't have a publication date. It is not included in this recipe book. But it does start off saying recipes that are favorites in the home of our temple members. Women everywhere like to share recipes, and we are happy to share these with you. We want to express our appreciation to all of those people who gave so generously of their time and energy in collecting, submitting, and putting together these recipes. Without their help, this book would not have been possible. And the editor is Carol Goldstein. So when I first got this recipe book, I flipped it open, not knowing that this recipe was in there when I purchased it. But when I saw this recipe, I thought, oh, I bet that's why I was guided to buy it. Because this is the recipe, Skokie type hummus. Now here's what's so cool about this. I grew up in Skokie, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. I did not know we had a Skokie type hummus. I did not taste hummus till I was probably in college or when I moved to LA. But here is a Skokie type hummus recipe in a sisterhood recipe book from New York. I just think that's a cool moment of serendipity. Like, okay, angels, that is pretty groovin' cool that you managed to get a Skokie recipe into this cookbook all those decades ago. And that I would just happen to buy it, not knowing it was there. And seeing this would delight me to no end. And this is one of those moments where I often will teach the universe is conspiring for your success. And I just think this is a real cool example of that somehow this recipe showed up in this cookbook all of these years later to delight my heart. And so I will share it with you. I haven't made this. I don't know if it's a good hummus recipe, but it delights me. So here we go. You take 1 can of chickpeas. They say that you can do dried chickpeas and soak them, but knowing me, I would just take a can. Likely mine would be from Trader Joe's. 1/4 cup of oil, and they say mazola oil. I would probably do avocado oil or olive oil. 1/4 cup of lemon juice. 1 tablespoon of chopped parsley. 1 onion chopped. 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1 large clove of garlic cut up. Put oil and lemon juice in blender and add the chickpeas gradually, running blender at high speed to puree. Add garlic, clove, and salt at the same time. Taste often during blending. What is wanted is a mixture, the consistency of heavy cream, in which the flavors of the ingredients are blended. If the mixture is getting too dry as chickpeas are added, increase the oil and lemon juice bit by bit. If the hummus is getting too oily or too tart, thin with a bit of water. And this recipe is from Julian Jablin. So thank you for including Skokie in this cookbook so that I would be utterly delighted. This next one sounds really good, and it sounds so easy that I could make it. It is a blintz souffle. If you don't know what blintzes are Jewish crepes. Crepes, perhaps, if you are going to pronounce them correctly. And this is my favorite kind of recipe. It says 2 packages of cheese blintzes. This is my kind of cooking. I don't have to make the blintzes. You just go get 2 packages. Frozen. So 2 packages of cheese blintzes. And that's a total of 12. A half a pound of melted butter. Okay, it's already delicious. Place frozen blintzes and butter in a shallow baking dish, 9 by 13. And then you beat together 6 eggs, 1 pint of sour cream, 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 cup of sugar, and a 1/4 cup of orange juice. You mix that all together, and you pour over the frozen blintzes and bake at 350 for 45 minutes. Remove and sprinkle with cinnamon and serve immediately. From Lori Isaacson. That sounds delicious. You had me at blintzes. I love blintzes, but I don't eat them anymore because I don't eat sugar. But I just like talking about them. So, the blintz souffle. Okay. I do have to share with you some of the diet recipes. For any of you who grew up in the 60s and 70s, you will remember these kinds of recipes because usually you or your mother or your aunt would bring them home from Weight Watchers. Everything involved some form of diet soda or sweet and low. All of those things, which were really supposed to keep us much healthier. This one cracked me up. I had to even share this one with my husband when I read it. So this is diet apple pie. Now, before you get excited that this resembles apple pie in any way, shape, or form, I will tell you ahead of time it does not. So, but welcome to the life of a perpetual dieter in the 60s and 70s. The first thing it says in this recipe, underlined so that there is no mistaking it, it involves no crust. No crust. So, put in pie pan, because of course if it's in a pie pan, at least emotionally, you'll feel like you're having pie. So it says put in pie pan or square pan. 4 apples, peeled, cored, and sliced. So that does resemble apple pie. Here's what it gets interesting. Dissolve 1 envelope of Knox gelatin. So that would be the unflavored gelatin in an 8-ounce bottle of Fresca. When I read this to my husband, he did not know what Fresca was. And I had to tell him that Fresca was always a diet soda. Fresca never came with sugar. And many of us drank Fresca. It was a good dietetic soda or pop, if I'm in Skokie talk. So we're going to take the envelope of Knox gelatin in an 8-ounce bottle of Fresca and pour that over the apples. Sprinkle with a mixture of diet sugar and cinnamon on top. Bake at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. And this came from Ethel Chase. And I just want to say to Mrs. Chase, thank you for giving us a snapshot of what diet cooking looked like back then, because I'm sure we would have made something like this for sure when I was younger, because I went to Weight Watchers for the first time when I was 7. We were definitely into dietetic things. I think my mom used to make me baked apples that involved coring the apple and pouring diet black cherry soda over it to sweeten it up. So let me see what other brilliant recipes I can find to share with you. I just love these. Hold on. This next recipe does involve chicken, so apologies ahead of time to those of you who are vegetarian. But this is called apricot preserved chicken, which is the exact same thing as my famous cranberry chicken, only it involves apricots. So you take 1 jar of apricot preserves, 1 bottle of wishbone Russian dressing, 1 cup of water, 1 package of Lipton onion soup mix, and chicken. And you pour the mixture over the chicken, and then you cook it at 350 for about 1.5 hours. So many of the Jewish recipes that I grew up with start with Lipton onion soup mix, or back in the day, it was Mrs. Grass French onion soup mix. So it is a flavor profile of many of the dishes that those of us who grew up this way remember. This next one absolutely reminds me of childhood. I don't know that I had this exact dish, but I know I had some variation of it. It's a dessert. It's called orange mallow whip. And I would imagine that many of you, if you're of the same generation that I am, had some variation of this. So it is 1 pound of miniature marshmallows. All good desserts involve marshmallows, right? Like you start with marshmallows, you can't go wrong. Here's where the memories come in. 3 cups of orange high C. How many of you remember the cans of high C? And you would have to open them. You'd have to have 2 holes, 1 on either side, so that you could pour it out. I remember birthdays in grammar school. There would be cans of high C and cupcakes and Tootsie Rolls. So we're already off to a rocking start. 1 pound of miniature marshmallows and 3 cups of orange high C, 1 package of orange Jell-O, 2 cups of diced orange mandarin sections, 2 to 3 sliced bananas, 1 package of Dream Whip. I'm wondering if that's the same as Cool Whip. I would imagine so. And vanilla wafers. Right? It's like, okay, yeah, sounds good. So in order to make it, in case you would like to try this at home, melt marshmallows in high C over low heat, stirring constantly. Add Jell-O until dissolved. Chill until slightly thickened. Beat mixture until frothy. Combine oranges, sliced bananas in above mixture. Then add the Dream Whip. Make Dream Whip according to package instructions. Put mashed vanilla wafers on bottom of pan and add mixture. Chill until firm. Add more vanilla wafers and whipped cream if desired. This recipe comes from Lori Isaacson. If I was a kid, I would have loved that for a birthday party, for sure. So as I read this next recipe to you, I want you to remember this was the day and age of TV dinners and packaged goods. You know, we didn't have access to a lot of regional and ethnic cooking back then. So you'll see why I'm giving you this disclaimer once I start reading this recipe. It's called cheese spaghetti sauce. It's a 1/4 cup of butter, 1 can of tomato soup, 2 tablespoons of ketchup, 2 slices of American cheese, 1 can of milk. Salt and pepper are the preferred seasonings. And to everyone who grew up with an Italian grandma, I am so sorry about this recipe. But it was, I don't know, it was a sign of the times back then. So we combine all ingredients in a saucepan, simmer over low heat, stir often. After all ingredients have melted, add cooked spaghetti and simmer together about 15 minutes. I'm laughing. My mom used to make baked spaghetti. I don't remember how she made it, but it would not surprise me if some of these elements were involved. So I don't know if she used tomato sauce or a pasta. I don't know that we had a lot of jarred pasta sauce back then, but maybe some spaghetti sauce. It did involve American cheese, and she would put it all together into a big bowl and would bake it. And we loved it. You know, it's like you love what you grew up with, I think. So I don't know. This recipe just brings back a lot of memories. I don't know all of them are good, but it certainly is reflective of how we used to cook back then. And could this possibly be an episode where I'm talking to you about Rosh Hashanah and Jewish recipes and not give you a kugel recipe? I could never do that to you, so I'm going to give you another kugel recipe. This one sounds kind of good. It's orange noodle kugel. I've never made this one, but it sounds interesting. So 8 ounces of 1/2-inch noodles, so these would be egg noodles, a 1/4 cup of melted margarine, or butter, I suppose, because there's other dairy in here, 1/2 cup of orange juice, 1/2 cup of orange marmalade, 1/2 pint of sour 1/2 or sour cream, I think, 1/2 cup of cottage cheese, 4 eggs separated, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1/2 cup of sugar, and the rind of your oranges. So cook noodles according to directions. Combine all ingredients except egg whites and orange marmalade with drained noodles. Then you fold in the egg whites. Bake at 350 degrees in pan of water for 1 hour. When it's done, pour 1/2 cup orange marmalade over the top, and that serves 10. It sounds good. Ooh, I didn't even know this. I have another dietetic pie recipe for you, for those of you who are paying attention and not yet asleep. This is a dietetic cherry pie. I am having so many flashbacks to my childhood. 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 cups of water-packed cherries with the juice. So those would be the canned cherries. 2 tablespoons of quick cooking tapioca, 2 tablespoons of shortening, 3 tablespoons of skim milk, because that's all we drank, skim. I didn't realize how delicious other milk was until I think I moved out on my own and discovered the joys of milk that actually has fat in it. So, of course, 3 tablespoons of skim milk, 3 teaspoons of sucralose. I don't know what kind of sugar substitute that is, but it was apparently on the market at the time. 1 egg beaten, 1 cup of flour, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So combine flour, baking powder, and salt in a bowl. Cut in shortening until mixture resembles consistency of cornmeal. Combine milk, sucralose, and egg. Add to dry ingredients, stirring only until dampened. Add the rest of the sucralose to the cherries. Place in a 1-quart casserole, sprinkle with tapioca, spoon batter over cherries. Bake at 350 degrees for 30 to 40 minutes. Makes 8 servings, 121 calories each. Because we would have certainly been paying attention to that back then, for sure. Here's one for an apple Kuchen. So Kuchen is like a coffee cake. I think it's a German word, or it might be Yiddish. So apple Kuchen, my grandmother made a great Kuchen that I associate with her. Then my mom would make it, and then my sister mastered it. So an ode to all the Kuchen makers out there. It's a 1/4 cup of margarine. You know, I want to give you a little, so what I was going to say about margarine doesn't apply here. Back in the late 60s and early 70s, there was this concerted effort to market margarine as much healthier than butter. For people who kept kosher, the good thing about margarine was it was not dairy. So for people who keep dairy and meat separate, you could use margarine in a recipe and you could still have it with meat. We didn't keep kosher in this way, so it didn't really matter. And I was going to muse that perhaps that's why they're using margarine in this Kuchen recipe, but I see that they have milk in it, so that threw that musing out the window. So that's where I was going. So never mind. But here we go. So 1/2 cup of margarine, 1 3/4 cups of sugar. That's a lot of sugar. Reserve 1/4 for the top. 3 cups of sliced apples, preferably greening. 2 teaspoons of baking powder. 1 teaspoon cinnamon. 2 eggs beaten, 1 teaspoon vanilla, 3 cups flour, 1 teaspoon salt, and 1 cup of milk. Cream margarine and 1 1/2 cups of sugar. Blend in eggs and vanilla. Sift flour, baking powder, and salt. Add alternately with milk. Pour batter into well-greased pan, approximately 13 by 9. Arrange apple slices on top and sprinkle with remaining 1/4 cup of sugar and cinnamon combined. Bake for 45 minutes or until lightly browned in 375-degree oven. Another favorite treat is Mandelbrot. I think I've shared a Mandelbrot recipe with you before. It's like Jewish biscotti. It's the best way to describe it. And we would also call it mandel bread. But the reason I want to read this one to you is it says Phil, P-H-Y-L, Phil's Mandelbrot. My mom's name was Phyllis, and this is not her recipe, but again, it feels like a sweet hello from heaven. So I'm going to share it with you. 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup shortening, 3 eggs, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 2 cups of flour, 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. I'm sorry, hold on, especially if you're writing this down, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of chopped pecans and cinnamon sugar. It sounds like my mom's recipe. It wouldn't be her. I mean, it could be a similar recipe, but I'm just saying this, my mom did not submit to this book. Preheat oven to 350 degrees. cream, sugar, and shortening. Add eggs one at a time. Add vanilla. Beat well. Add flour, baking powder, salt, and nuts. Spread 4 2-inch logs across the length of cookie sheets. You will use 2 cookie sheets. Sprinkle with cinnamon sugar. Bake for 20 minutes. Take from the oven. Slice logs into 1/2-inch pieces. Separate and put back in oven to toast. Watch that they do not burn. Approximately 15 minutes. And Phyllis Golden submitted this recipe. I love Mandelbrot. I haven't had it in a long time. Again, I don't eat sugar, but just hearing the recipe makes me happy. And then I thought, to sing us home, as it were, I would share with you a honey cake recipe. I don't have my mom's recipe. I forgot to get it from my sister. So I looked through all of my cookbooks looking for a honey cake recipe, because typically that's what we would have for Rosh Hashanah, because honey and apples are very symbolic for this holiday, so that you are energizing a sweet new year. And I didn't find one in the cookbook I was just reading to you from. So I did find one in another recipe book called 500 Years in the Kitchen from Temple Emmanuel in Dallas, and it was published in 1965. And this is their honey cake recipe. And a lot of the honey cake recipes are similar to this. And I was surprised because they all seem to involve coffee. And I don't recall honey cake being made with coffee, but almost every recipe I found as I was looking through the different recipe books today involved coffee. So here we go. Honey cake. 3 eggs. 1 cup of sugar. 1 cup of honey. 3½ cups of flour. 1 teaspoon baking powder. 1 teaspoon baking soda. 1 teaspoon of salt. 1 teaspoon vanilla, 1 cup strong black coffee, 1 cup of salad oil, 1 teaspoon of nutmeg, 3 teaspoons of cinnamon, and 1 cup of nuts chopped. Beat eggs and add sugar. Beat again. Add honey. Add salad oil. Add sifted dry ingredients, which is flour, baking powder, baking soda, salt, and spices, alternately with coffee and vanilla mixture. Beat at a low speed as necessary. Put mixture into 2 8-inch square pans. Sprinkle chopped nuts on top and bake at 325 degrees for approximately 45 minutes. And this recipe is from Mrs. S.E. Ziegler, and then in parens it says that her name is Florence. My mom used to make her honey cake in loaf pans. And I seem to recall she would always make several of them because, in our house, we ate this stuff like crazy. When there was a holiday, my mom had to make extras of everything because we would eat it for breakfast or a snack. So usually for Rosh Hashanah, it involved a kugel and challah and honey cake, all delicious foods. And so here we are. When I started this part of the episode, I wasn't really sure where we would go. I thought maybe I'll read you recipes and maybe I'll tell you stories, and we wound up doing a little bit of everything, right? These recipes delight me, if you can't tell. They are such a snapshot of my childhood. All the dietetic recipes, the things that involve onion soup mix or salad dressing. It's how I grew up. And I just love the women who would submit these recipes. And then you'd have the committee that would put them together, probably would be typing these out on their typewriters for some of them to get them printed. And then they would sell them as a fundraiser for the sisterhood. And they have these community cookbooks in all kinds of different communities, in different churches or PTAs, Kiwanis, regional groups. If you go onto eBay and you look up community recipe books or community cookbooks, you will find so many different cookbooks, and perhaps you will find one that mirrors to you how you grew up. So may you find little moments of delight in your dreams tonight and in your day as you wake up tomorrow. I love that something so small can bring such big delight. Like when I opened that cookbook and there was the Skokie hummus. Like, what is a Skokie hummus recipe doing in a sisterhood recipe book from New York? Makes no sense unless you are me in the year 2022. And I think, oh my God, of course there is a Skokie recipe in this book as a talisman of magic that would find me all these years later when I was feeling homesick, and I would see something that is from Skokie in a random recipe book that I had no idea was even there. I love magic. I love when the angels swing it out of the park like that. And it's like, that is so cool that just happened. So I share my joy and my wonder and my love with you, dear ones. I send you blessings of light. I send you wishes of magic. I send you the reminder that you are precious in this universe, and I am so deeply grateful for the gift of you. And if you happen to be listening on Erev Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah, I wish you Happy New Year. Good Yentov. Shana Tova. And for any of you who speak Hebrew, I say Laila Tov. That means good night, just so you know. Laila is night and Tov is good. So Laila Tov, my dear friends. I love you, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.